The 1960s and 70s were a time of change in America. The traditional family structure was evolving, as were the roles of men and women in society. The assassinations of major civil rights leaders and the Vietnam War dominated the headlines. And on the lighter side, the Cultural Revolution led to iconic fashion statements like bell-bottoms and leisure suits. But despite all the changes, there was one constant, at least for many families, their dinner table. Although the Great Depression had officially ended decades before, its legacy lived on in the American kitchen. The economic hardships of the 30s had taught a generation how to make the most out of very little, and those lessons were still being passed down through recipes and family traditions. So let's roll up our sleeves and dig into this comforting cuisine born out of necessity, but enjoyed by millions. At No. 1, we have Spam. Nothing says post-war America quite like Spam. This canned meat product made from chopped pork shoulder and ham was a staple in many American households. Not only was it cheap and filling, but it also had a salty, distinctive flavor that could be elevated with the right recipe. In the 60s and 70s, it wasn't just food. It was survival in a can. It could be fried for breakfast, baked with pineapple for dinner, or sliced into sandwiches for lunch. And no matter how it was prepared, it was always a crowd pleaser. At number 2, we have powdered milk. Fresh milk could be expensive, so many families turned to powdered milk as a cost-effective alternative. It was easy to store and lasted much longer, making it a popular choice for school cafeterias and families on a tight budget. Kids drank it, sometimes wishing for the real thing, but powdered milk became synonymous with growing up in the 60s and 70s. At No. 3, we have Jell-O. Bright, wobbly, and cheap, Jell-O molds were a common sight on dinner tables across America. Made from gelatin, this iconic dessert came in a variety of flavors and could be molded into countless shapes. Sometimes sweet, sometimes filled with vegetables, or even mayonnaise. Jell-O was both loved and loathed for its distinctive texture. But one thing is for sure, it was the taste of an era, for better or worse. At No. 4, we have casseroles. The casserole was the ultimate Depression-era dish, a culinary masterpiece that could be made with whatever ingredients you had on hand. With a can of soup, some noodles, and whatever leftovers you had in the fridge, you were halfway to a delicious meal. It didn't require much skill or time, just a whole lot of love. And that made it perfect for busy families in the 60s and 70s. At number 5, we have meatloaf. This classic dish was a staple in many American households during the 60s and 70s, and for good reason. By combining breadcrumbs with ground beef and topping it with ketchup, families could stretch their meat further and add extra flavor to their meals. Meatloaf wasn't just dinner. It was tradition. It was the taste of home, and it was a reminder of the importance of family and togetherness. At No. 6, we have canned beans. In the 60s and 70s, canned beans were a pantry staple for many families. They were cheap, filling, and easy to store, making them the perfect addition to any emergency food supply. Whether baked beans with molasses or brown sugar, they provided a comforting, familiar taste that reminded people of simpler, leaner times. At number 7, we have hot dogs. They weren't fancy, but they were affordable, which is why hot dogs became such a popular choice for families in the 60s and 70s. Whether boiled, fried, or grilled, they were a summertime staple at backyard cookouts, school cafeterias, and family dinners. Hot dogs were the everyman's meal, a simple, satisfying bite of Americana. At No. 8, we have government cheese. During tough economic times, the government distributed giant blocks of processed cheese to struggling families. It wasn't gourmet, but it was appreciated. Kids might have complained about the taste, but it made for some pretty tasty grilled cheese sandwiches, macaroni and casseroles that filled empty stomachs and warmed grateful hearts. At No. 9, we have stews and soups. In the 60s and 70s, stews and soups were a common sight on family dinner tables. These dishes were not only comforting and flavorful, but also incredibly versatile. A big pot of stew or soup could feed a family for days, making it a great way to stretch ingredients and save money. Leftover meat, carrots, potatoes, and onions simmered together in a rich, flavorful broth, creating a dish that was as nourishing as it was delicious. And finally, at No. 10, we have fried bologna sandwiches. Bologna, often referred to as the poor man's belly meat, was a staple in many working-class households during the 60s and 70s. Fried bologna sandwiches were a quick, easy meal that could be made with just a few ingredients. Simply fry bologna slices in a skillet until crispy, and then pile them high between slices of white bread with mustard. The result was a salty, savory sandwich that was both nostalgic and satisfying. These foods may not have been the most glamorous, but they were more than just meals. They were a testament to the resourcefulness of a generation that had learned to make the most out of tough economic times. They were a source of comfort and familiarity in an ever-changing world, and they were an important part of family. Tradition passed down from the hardships of the Great Depression into the kitchens of the 60s and 70s. So the next time you see a can of Spam or a box of Jell-O, remember the generations of Americans who have enjoyed these humble foods and the stories they tell about our country as past. Which one do you remember the most? Spam, meatloaf, or maybe that wobbly Jell-O mold? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more trips back in time.